Then the Sports Central, we go over our next schedule preview this offseason, and it's going to be over the LSU Tigers, a team that came back from the dead in the 2022 season. This team was 10-4 in 2022. They won the SEC West and very much were a contender once again in 2022. But as we look forward to 2023, this team is considered even more of a contender. This team is in the talks of being a potential college football playoff contender once again. And whether or not that's true and how high could this team get in 2023 is what we'll be talking about here today. We'll be going over the players this team will be losing, who will they be returning, and previewing their schedule for the first time this offseason. Let's get started with a quick recap of 2022. This team was 10-4 once again in 2022. It was a great season. I mean, this team lost to Florida State in week 1, which obviously was a disappointing start to the season. But, I mean, if you consider where Florida State ended up, I mean, they turned out to be a big contender in the ACC last season. And for LSU, I mean, a 1-point loss, that turned out to be one of the more significant games of the season there on that Sunday night of week 1. But they beat Southern then, dominated them the next week. They beat Mississippi State 31-16, beat New Mexico big, shut them out, beat Auburn on the road 21-17. And then they played Tennessee on the 8th of October. This is really where Tennessee's rise very much started, you could say. I mean, Tennessee was already successful at that point, but when the Vols beat LSU 40-13, I think we kind of knew, Tennessee was going to be a problem in the SEC last season. And then LSU goes back. They beat Florida the next week by 10 on the road, beat Ole Miss 45-20, impressive win there. And then they had that huge win over Alabama on that Saturday night to start off November in overtime, beat Arkansas in a lower scoring one, beat UAB 41-10, and they lost to Texas A&M 23-38 to finish out the regular season. Obviously, Texas A&M was, you could probably say, the biggest disappointment in college football last year, so that's not a game you want to lose, but in the end, it just came down to it, and that was just one of their disappointing losses, but otherwise, it was still a solid season. They lost to Georgia 50-30 in the SEC Championship, a higher scoring game there. Georgia was pretty dominant for the most part, but LSU did score 30 in the end, and then they beat Purdue 63-7 in the Citrus Bowl to finish out the season. So a successful season for LSU. They won the SEC West over Alabama. I mean, what else can you ask for in a college football season if you're LSU? And this team, considering their disappointing seasons of 2020 and 2021, this was a very encouraging season, I would say, for LSU, and considering the talent that this team has coming back as we look forward to 2023, this team could very much be a problem in the 2023 season. Jaden Daniels is coming back, the quarterback for this team, who was the transfer from Arizona State heading into the season. Still is a transfer from Arizona State, but he is definitely showing his potential as he put up 2,900 yards, 17 touchdowns, over 3 interceptions, a 69% completion rate. Outstanding season for Jaden Daniels. And I mean, if you look back to his career with Arizona State, he was there for 3 years. He was the primary starter for 3 seasons with the Sun Devils. His first season, his freshman year in 2019, we really saw the potential of Jaden Daniels. And the funny thing is, if you look back at his stats from 2019 and compare them with 2022, I mean, they're almost identical, except his completion rate in 2022 is 9% more than it was in 2019. If you look at 2019 stats, 2,900 yards, 17 touchdowns, over 2 interceptions. You compare that with 2022, 2,900 yards, 17 touchdowns, over 3 picks. So, I mean, the thing is, though, is 2020 and 2021, you could say, were somewhat disappointing seasons for him at Arizona State. So for him now at LSU, gotta continue to improve here, and we've seen his potential for 2 seasons in his college career. And if you can take that next step, improve going into 2023, I think LSU is a team to really keep an eye on. You look at the backfield, this team is doing just fine. Josh Williams coming back, same with Noah Cain, and you also return your 3rd running back in John Emery Jr. This team has got tremendous depth in the backfield as we look forward to next season. Jaden Daniels was the lead rusher on this team with 900 yards, 12 touchdowns. I mean, what more can you ask for out of a quarterback, a dual-threat quarterback? And once again, we mentioned the running backs. I mean, Williams, Cain, and Emery combined for over 1,500 yards last season on the ground. I'd say over 1,600 and 24 touchdowns, something to keep in mind. Receiving core, Malik Neighbors is coming back, who put up over 1,000 yards last season, 3 touchdowns. Keyshawn Boutte, you do lose him He was your second in the receiving core last season with just right around 600 yards. Mason Taylor's coming back, the tight end, third in receiving. You do lose your third receiver and your fourth in receiving yards last season in Jere Jenkins. You lose one on the offensive line, 2 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 4 in the secondary. So offensively, this team should very well be one of the top teams in the country, I think. But defensively, that is a bit of a question mark. I mean, you're losing a lot of your key players from last season. 3 linebackers, 4 in the secondary especially is where I'm most concerned. So this team could very well be one of the top teams in the country. But on the defense, I'm a bit concerned with many of those losses. This team is losing a lot of players defensively, most notable B.J. Ojulari, a linebacker who is gone, one of the top-rated players heading into the NFL draft. You also lose Jacqueline Roy on the defensive line, Ali Gay on the defensive line, and obviously several players in the secondary. So we'll see if this team can replace him. Honestly, the recruiting's been good enough. I think this team will be okay, but it is something to keep in mind. And whether or not the Tigers can return to the college football playoff, I think it heavily depends on how consistent this team is. They do have a difficult schedule. We'll get into that in a few minutes, but I mean, I do think this team, talent-wise, is very much able to be a big contender for the college football playoff. Transfer portal and recruiting heading into next season. You do lose a backup quarterback, Walker Howard. Aaron Anderson, receiver, is coming in from Alabama. Jack Beck, a tight end, is taken off to TCU. He did have an impact on this team this past season. I think he had right around 200 yards. Marcus Dummerville, offensive tackle, left to Maryland. Paris Shand, defensive lineman, is coming in from Arizona. Defensive lineman Jordan Jefferson coming in from West Virginia. So you are adding multiple key players from the transfer portal for this defense, which is very much crucial to this team. You also have an edge rusher coming in from Texas and one coming in from Oregon, and Braden Swinson. Otherwise, Jalen Lee, defensive lineman, is coming in from Florida. Edge rusher, you're losing Desmond Little. He is in the transfer portal right now. You bring in Omar Spates, someone to keep in mind, linebacker from Oregon State. You lose DeMario Tolan to Auburn, linebacker there. And then you're bringing in 4 defensive backs. Your Denver Harris from Texas A&M, Deuce Chestnut from Syracuse, J.K. Johnson from Ohio State, and then Zy Alexander from Southeast Louisiana. So at least the good thing is you're losing plenty of players just to the NFL draft defensively, multiple key players. Good thing is you are bringing in multiple key players from the transfer portal who should have an immediate impact going into next season. Recruiting-wise, this team is 6th in the country, 3rd in the SEC. Things are looking good. They got 2 5-stars coming in and then 16 4-stars. So in the future forecast meter, I got this team at a 9 out of 10. I think the future is great for LSU. Brian Kelly is already making an excellent impact. I think this team is going to be a contender once again for many years to come. This team was in a rebuild phase in 2020 and 2021. This team is back from the dead. They are very much a contender as we look forward to 2023. But that said, let's get to the schedule now. Looking into next season, you got Florida State in week 1. That is in Orlando there. And Florida State is a team heading into next season that I expect to very much be a contender. And that is such a crucial game coming up in week 1. I mean, you got 2 teams there between Florida State and LSU that are very much on the rise right now. And I think both teams could be in the college football playoff next season. So that Sunday night game of week 1 could potentially be the biggest game, the most influential one, the most significant one of week 1. So got to keep an eye on that one and be ready for that. Grambling State then comes after that. Mississippi State on the road on the 16th. And then you got Arkansas home on the 23rd, Ole Miss on the road to finish out September. And then in October, you got Missouri on the road, Auburn at home, and then Army at home. And then in November, you got Alabama on the road. Huge game there that very likely will determine who wins the SEC West once again as we look forward to 2023. Then you got Florida at home, Georgia State at home, and then Texas A&M also at home to finish out the regular season. So that's it. Let's look at September here. Florida State, what a huge game in week 1. I can't express that just because, I mean, especially for Florida State being in the ACC, they're going to really want to win that game because that is a huge resume game for them. But in the end, I will be favoring LSU to win that matchup. I mean, Florida State won it last year. I'll favor LSU for now. We're too far out to predict it entirely, but I will be favoring LSU in that matchup right now. Grambling State, easy win. Mississippi State and Arkansas put both in yellow, but I do want to favor LSU in both of those. Be careful about that Mississippi State game on the road. And then Arkansas, I think you should take care of them. Razorbacks, I don't expect to be great. They should get to a bowl game, but I don't expect them to be a major contender. And then Ole Miss on the road. I will actually favor the Rebels in this matchup. I think that's a very winnable game for LSU. But being on the road after a tough stretch already in September between Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Florida State, I think that Ole Miss game could potentially be a sneaky one there for LSU. But I think the ceiling is 5-0 in September for this team, 3-2 as the floor, just in case if you lose a couple. I mean, there are multiple games you could lose in your first 5, but I do think there's very much a possibility you do go 5-0. October isn't too concerning of a month. You got Missouri, Auburn, Army, all very winnable games, and I think you win all 3. Missouri, I'll put that in yellow just because it's on the road, but Auburn and Army you should take care of no problem. So your ceiling's 8-0 heading into November, 5-3 is the floor. Alabama on the road to start off November, which is a crucial game there. Your last road game of the regular season, and more than likely will determine who wins the SEC West. And being on the road in Tuscaloosa, I'm going to favor Alabama in that matchup right now. I do think the Crimson Tide will be a contender once again next season. I mean, that's all you can expect with Nick Saban and that team. I do have a couple of question marks about, or I have a couple of questions about Alabama heading into the season, especially in the quarterback position, but I do think they end up, especially in November, they should be playing their best ball. That's going to be a tough one there. Then Florida, Georgia State, Texas A&M. I'll favor LSU in all 3 of those. They're all at home. Georgia State, easy win. Florida and Texas A&M could be tougher ones, closer ones. But in the end, I'll favor you in those games as well. So I'll say ceiling 11-1 for this team. I considered making it 12-0, but this is just too tough of a schedule to put this team ceiling at 12-0 right now. I just think this team does take a loss at some point. I mean, that doesn't mean you're out of the college football playoff, even if you're 11-1, as shown by this past season. But I mean, I just think this team at one point will be taking a loss, whether that's to Alabama, Ole Miss, or Florida State. I mean, your one loss of the season, if you do go 11-1, is probably going to be either Florida State, Ole Miss, or Alabama. I mean, all 3 of those are going to be your toughest ones of the season, I would say. And there's a few trap games otherwise, but I do think in the end, I'd say 10 wins is a pretty good estimate for where LSU is going to be next season. But obviously, there is also potential beyond that, considering the talent of this team as we look forward to 2023. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this LSU team, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.